A beautiful, beautiful Sunday morning of weather in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states after a beautiful Saturday. We have the week ahead, the long range to look at, and there's some minor issues that we'll have to deal with. There's some severe weather over parts of the Midwest. We'll talk about that and more coming up right now on the Sunday morning Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in
West Babylon.
New York in Southwest Suffolk County. And they've got mulch, topsoil, sand, and everything you need, whether you are a professional landscaper or a do-it-yourselfer. Get the truck over to Omni and get what you need. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And the website is...
Let me see. What is that website? Oh, that's right. OmniTrueValue.com.
And Tempest by Weatherflow, our newest affiliate. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system or any other weather gadgets or weather merchandise that you might want. They make great Mother's Day gifts. And join the fastest growing observing network on the planet. You can find the link, our link, to Tempest on the chat board pinned at the very top and also on the descriptor to this video. And if you use the coupon code...
What is the coupon code? Oh, Joe and Joe. That's right.
No, Joe and Joe
Weather Show.
Yes, the Joe and Joe, right. Joe and Joe Weather Show is the coupon code, and
I'm a little slow on Sunday mornings.
Clearly. And use the coupon code and you get 10% off.
It's not 80%?
No, you get 10% off. You get 100% of the product you ordered, but you get 10% off the purchase price. All right.
Yes.
Now that we seem to have worked our way through all of that, just gorgeous. I mean, one of the things, I guess the threshold is sort of low when you've had a miserable week of weather for the most part. So any kind of a day where you get no rain, fewer clouds and some sun, you're likely to call that a gorgeous day. But yesterday really was absolutely terrific. And today is certainly starting off that way.
It looks like finally, we are going to have, for the first time all year, a weekend with temperatures in the 70s. We had, as you just said, a lovely day yesterday. Maybe not quite as lovely today because we will begin to see a buildup of clouds later in the day today. But that's not going to stop anybody from going out and having a good time. And then we'll get a little wet perhaps during the overnight hours tonight.
The only day I thought that might be an issue might be Tuesday, where the wind is going to be southeast. And I thought that between that and clouds and maybe some showers later in the day that you wind up holding the temperatures down a bit.
And if you remember when we were last together, we were playing with AI, artificial intelligence.
Yes, we were.
And you had typed in the forecast for Putnam Valley for today. And that forecast said that we were going to see scattered thunderstorms this afternoon.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen.
No, but it also had, but to be fair, it also had, it picked up on this disturbance coming through. And it had mentioned that there would be some showers during Sunday night. So we have to give it a little credit for that.
Just a little, but
just a little.
Yes, just a credit. Yes.
Anthony Sparacchio gives us credit in the tip jar this morning, Joe. Thank you, Anthony. Good morning to you too. Good morning to everybody on the chat board this morning. I know on a nice weather day and not a whole lot happening, that a lot of folks might decide that, well, maybe we'll watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show a little later on this afternoon or this evening. And you certainly have that ability to do that. And you could do that also by subscribing to our YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, and just turn on your notifications, because the Joe and Joe Weather Show is on every day, Monday through Thursday, from 7:35 to at 7:35 p.m. Now, technically, we're not on every day of the week. Friday and Saturday we are off, and of course, we are here on Sunday morning. Before we get to the weather, Joe, did you watch? I happened to get up yesterday morning at 5 a.m. I went to bed early Friday night. I could not sleep. I woke up, and of course, I turned on and watched. I don't know if you know. I was not able to attend the coronation. Charles really was disappointed because you know how close he and I are, and how close how close I am to the royal family. But did you happen to watch any of it?
I did not watch a single second of that coronation.
Okay,
We were up. The dog, as per usual, around 5:30 or so, wakes us up to let us know that it's time for him to make his first entry into the great outdoors to do his thing. But neither one of us at that hour decided we'd flick on the TV. And by the time we finally got going later on in the morning, it was pretty well all done. So
well, then you didn't notice. I picked up on this, Joe. It's very important. There's a lot of symbolism and a lot of, there's the crown and the scepter and a few other things. But I did notice, Joe, this. Do you know what this is?
I can't see it.
It should be up on your screen momentarily.
Okay.
But when it comes up on the screen, you'll see it, and then you can take a guess as to what that is.
Okay. Well, I'm still waiting for it.
Oh, you're still not there?
Oh, there it is. Oh, yes. It looks like.
I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
It's the holy hand grenade of Antioch. Bless this thy hand grenade, so that thou might blow thy enemies into tiny bits in thy mercy.
I did see this morning on CBS Sunday Morning clips of the coronation. I was told that the new king wanted to modernize the whole ordeal, if you will. So instead of having, as his mother had, an 8-wheel chariot or carriage, he only had a 6-wheel carriage, lighter and less horsepower needed to pull the darn thing.
Although it does have air conditioning.
It does have.
It does. They explained it. It was quite kind of interesting for those that are into cars and mechanics and everything. They explained the fact that there were two carriages, and the traditional carriage, apparently, just to sort of simplify all this, didn't really come equipped with shock absorbers. So it was really uncomfortable. They'd get bumped along the way, and they would feel just every bump and every jerk up and down. But this one apparently has sophisticated hydraulics. It's got air conditioning. I wonder if it has a wet bar. That was front and center on my mind.
And they said instead of being 3 hours long, 3.5 hours long, was only 3 hours. They cut a whole half hour out of the ceremony. But no, I did not partake in any of the festivities yesterday on television. I did watch the Kentucky Derby, and that was interesting.
Yeah, the horse I liked was Two Phils, and it came in second. That horse ran a very good race. Just got caught at the bottom, at the end of the stretch. And Mage ran a great race, so it was what it was. I didn't have any money on it, so
I would have thought that the horse that had been shipped around from the Middle East and Japan or whatever, and running the Derby yesterday,
right.
I would have thought that horse was going to win, if for nothing else. If I was a horse and being flown all around the world in a plane, I'd probably be nipping at the bit to just run and get the heck out of there. So
yeah,
I guess
there's a long history of horses that when they get shipped to Dubai and wherever else they race overseas, but mostly it's in Dubai. When they ship for those Dubai races and then they come back to the United States, they're just not the same. whether it's the travel or just the whole experience kind of takes them down a couple of notches. I don't know, but bottom line was I also kind of had that same mindset with that horse. I did, if I'd have bet him, I probably would have used him in the exotics. That it did ship overseas successfully and went to different tracks and won a bunch of different races. It should certainly cause people to bet it, but just whatever, for whatever reason, when you're running 20 or 18 horses yesterday, when you're running 20 horses in a race like that, you need a lot of luck that you get you get your horses out fast enough and you
Right.
get into a good spot, because it's just a cavalry charge and a huge traffic jam. So you could have the best horse, but for some reason, if you're not, if you're not in a good spot, if you're caught way on the outside, or any long list of reasons why you won't win the race, you won't win the race.
I'm supposed to have Renata and I are supposed to have a Zoom conference on Tuesday with our annual financial consultant meeting, and I told her last night. I said, we should tell them on Tuesday we bet everything on a long shot and lost everything. So there's no need for you to bother us anymore, because we don't have anything.
Right. There's nothing to consult about. Gotcha.
Exactly.
All right, let's take a look at what's going on weather-wise. In the month of May, it does kind of get quiet, and certainly, you transition away from the winter months and you move through the spring months. Weather becomes more and more localized in terms of its impact. So you don't have any widespread storms. You don't have widespread watches and warnings up, which is the case this morning. Most of the nation's pretty quiet. You've got a few special weather statements up for in New England. I'm guessing that they're up. I'm going to just take my guess is that it's because of dry conditions. No. Well, okay, here's a special weather statement out of Maine. They've got beach hazards. I mean, I suppose, it's nice to walk the beach in Maine. I don't know whether you want to go in the water at the beginning of May. Oh, okay, so the special weather statement is about the warm temperatures in the low to mid 70s, which may cause people to underestimate. These are the folks up in northern New England are a hardy sort. They're not like us babies further south, where we require water temperatures at least up in the mid 70s before we'll adventure in. But they said the statement from Maine says warm air temperatures in the low to mid 70s. Now think about that, folks. May cause people to underestimate the dangers of cold water temperatures, which are currently only in the mid 40s. Okay, I guess they had some sort of anticipation of people going out there, but anyone on small boats, canoes, and kayaks should plan accordingly.
Yes.
Okay, so all right.
So,
at least they didn't,
because
they didn't mention people actually going in the water.
I'm looking at this same statement. Imagine Tom Grant. The cold water temperatures can quickly cause hypothermia to anyone immersed in the water. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, when the water temperatures are below 50 degrees, the chances of immediate incapacitation due to cold shock is extremely high. So you go in the water, it's like 48 degrees. You step in.
Well, what's the coldest water temp? That's all of the special weather statements in New England are referencing that. What's the coldest water temperature you've ever gone in?
Oh, I don't know. You're right. I mean, if you go to the beach, if it's the temperatures are anything lower than 70 degrees, when I put my Tootsies in, I'll immediately say, "Oh, too cold," and just walk back to the blanket. But I can't even imagine jumping in. And you think about this now, the people like, for example, on the Titanic, where they had to, it was the temperature was when it was early April. They were out in the North Atlantic. It was probably somewhere in the low 40s or near 40. Can you imagine being subjected to that? I mean,
well, I'll tell you from my own personal experience. While everybody looks at the gorgeous satellite loop of the Northeast, even though you could see the clouds out to the west, the coldest I've been was in July on the Jersey Shore after some upwelling, and temperatures were in the water temperatures were in the low 50s, and I dove into that. I mean, it feels it actually feels like knives are going through your body.
Wow.
It is not. It's I don't know how people do it on those, those polar bear plunges that they do where they go into water
Yeah.
temperatures near 40. Uh, yeah, that's not my thing. That's why, aside from the fact of what it does to certain, how shall we say, um, attachments to one's person in terms of size reduction, but we'll leave that to everyone's imagination. It's painful. It really is painful, and then it took me a while to feel better. I mean, I literally just dove in, was in agony, and just like got out of the water as fast as I could. So I do not advise it if you've never done it before. If you're not part of a polar bear club, pass on it. Okay,
Right.
pass on it. I advise. But gorgeous. I got the eastern tight loop. Looks very, very nice up and down the coastal plain. But we do see these clouds to the west, and they're kind of creeping eastward. So I'm thinking we'll probably have another few hours here before we'll start to get some of those clouds to come in. But temperatures getting up into the 70s today. Certainly a nice setup. And this is a weak system that's moving eastward. It doesn't look like most of the thunderstorms are actually on the southern flank of that moving southeastward. So I don't really see getting much in the way of rain during during tonight.
It's also progressive. It's a pretty fast-moving system, and once it's out early tomorrow, we should break out into a fair amount of sunshine. The sunshine should stay with us right on through the rest of the day, and generally clear weather into the early part of tomorrow night before the next disturbance comes our way for Tuesday.
Right, and those are really the only two players in the next 7 days or so. I also think, by the way, by the time we get to the end of the week, by Friday, we could be in the 80s.
Yes, I would not. Certainly, mid to upper 70s is a given. 80, yes, and in fact, considering how the tendency is that 5 days or more out, the temperatures tend to be usually in situations like this somewhat conservative. And then as you approach and get closer to, let's say, Friday, we see the temperatures go from the projected high temperatures go from like 75, 77. Here it is now. It's Wednesday. 80, and who knows? Might even get maybe in one or two spots lower 80s by next weekend.
Yeah, Chuck Cardillo appreciates us talking about what he refers to as other interesting topics. Uh, yes, I may have gone into more detail than you might otherwise appreciate, but thank you, Chuck, for hitting the tip jar today on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. There's that wide satellite view, as we said. There's also some nice weather in parts of you see that little sliver of dry air that's kind of pushed up into Illinois and Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, that goes back to the Central Plains and into the Southwest. Some spotty patches of moisture in the Northwest, and it looks like a blow up of some showers and storms down in Texas. And we'll take a look at what's on the radar. And there's a nice. When I say nice, I don't mean from the standpoint that it's nice that they're getting weather that's potentially destructive. I'm thinking in terms of the meteorological structure of this. If you look at the radar, there's nothing close to Pittsburgh, so that says that the rain probably won't reach the longitude of New York City until maybe about 8 o'clock or so. But we do have some downpours and some thunderstorms right now in southern Ohio, into western parts of West Virginia, across Kentucky from east to west in the northern half. And there are a few severe thunderstorms. There's actually five of them. No, four. It was 4, 5, then 4 that are ongoing there. But again, that part of it is moving southeastward. So we're just going to kind of get clipped by the northern part. And down in Texas, with that blow up of clouds, you see some thunderstorms there between Houston and San Antonio and south of I-10. And it looks like there are also a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings that are popping up in that area. Not too much going on, though, in the Pacific Northwest. The Storm Prediction Center today has marginal to slight risk across Texas and northwest Louisiana, marginal risk across Tennessee, Kentucky, western Virginia, West Virginia, southern West Virginia, western North Carolina, and the line just about crosses my front yard here of the marginal risk. The enhanced risk in Iowa, northern Missouri, northernmost Missouri, eastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas. Another small area of marginal risk indicated in western South Dakota and southeastern Montana. So they dealing with these sort of scattered areas. They did on a mesoscale discussion from earlier, talking about those thunderstorms in Kentucky. They said severe thunderstorm watch is unlikely. So doesn't seem to want to get to the level that would warrant any kind of severe thunderstorm watch for later today. Tornado risk, 5% in that enhanced area in Iowa today, and also in parts of southeastern Nebraska. For tomorrow, the Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk, central Missouri to southern Illinois, including St. Louis. Marginal into Kentucky and Tennessee. Marginal back into Oklahoma, Kansas, and north central Texas. Next day is Tuesday into Wednesday. And we have on this particular day marginal risk being indicated in southern Virginia, eastern North Carolina into South Carolina. Marginal to slight risk from West Texas northward into northern Oklahoma and Kansas, and even western Missouri, and another marginal risk area up the plains, the western plains, Wyoming, into South Dakota. You know, one of the things I was thinking about too over the last couple of days, sometimes my mind kind of ventures into the weather world on my off time, trying to figure out where the overall pattern looks to go. You know, I just wonder whether as we go through the next couple of months, if we get another one of these big upper lows, Joe, that comes down into the eastern part of the United States, you wonder whether that might be a catalyst. You know, we did see some low top thunderstorms and some hail, but you know, you get a strong upper low, say in late May or early June. You know, that might be a catalyst maybe for a severe weather outbreak in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. But I'm talking, you know, I'm just talking in theory here, long ways
Right.
down the road.
Hypothetical.
Yes. Hypothetical.
Yes.
Exactly. Trish Sparacchio joins Anthony Sparacchio because they're Mr. and Mrs. and hitting the tip jar. Thank you. Happy Sunday to you, and appreciate very much doing that, Trish and Anthony, of course, and Chuck Cardillo. Rainfall this week, not a whole heck of a lot. In a pattern where you're dealing with just weak weather disturbances moving through the Northeast, it's basically mostly 1/10 of an inch or less, a few stripes of 1/4 of an inch here and there, but you know, nothing to really write home about. Most of the time this week's going to be dry. Big rains in Texas, several inches or more, reaching up into Oklahoma and Arkansas. Also in much of Kansas, there's a drought area going on in there, so this rain is certainly welcome. Also, inch and a half or better across Kentucky into northern Tennessee. A lot of that's happening right now. And also big rains in Montana, several inches or more up into the Dakotas. So we're we're getting a little payback from the misery of last week with a drier pattern going into this week.
And I notice also in the Southwest on your 7-day WPC outlook for precip that Arizona and western New Mexico and southern Utah and a good bulk of southern California will not see any precipitation this week. I hope that's not a sign that we're going to be undoing all of the atmospheric rivers that brought all of that heavy-duty rainfall over the winter and early spring to these areas. In other words, I hope we're not looking for a flip now back to drought conditions. I mean, we know that we're entering now the dry season for these locales. But I just hope it's not exceptionally dry. I hope it, you know, in terms of what's happening in Arizona, that maybe we'll see a more prolific. Well, we did actually last summer monsoon season, which helped get the ball rolling to getting rid of the drought. But you know, it's a standout that now after all of those weeks and weeks of heavy duty rains that just, you know, hit that part of the country that now we're seeing a spell of dry weather. The question is now, how long will that dry weather persist in the coming days ahead in the Southwest?
Well, we'll take a look at the upper air, see what's going on there and across the country. Of course, I backed up to Wednesday night when that upper low in the east made its dive off the New Jersey coast, and then took another 2 days really for it to get out of the way. And now, of course, as we are in this weekend here with this sort of northwest flow on the edge of a weak ridge, but not really totally into the weak ridge, which is why we're not warming up in a huge way. Warming up nicely, but not in a huge way. Pattern still looks kind of blocky going into next week, but we're not in a bad spot. You got the upper low between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. That's good. That keeps the flow dry into the northeast, other than weak weather disturbances, and we do have one coming for Tuesday. Meanwhile, there is troughing in the west, so that does allow for more chances for some precip there. It's not an endless stream coming in off the Pacific because there's a big cutoff that's forming in the Gulf of Alaska and dropping southward toward Hawaii. That usually likes to pump up ridging in the west, which is it's doing to an extent. But it's sort of a broken flow here where you've got pieces of short waves in a northern stream. For example, here this is for late next week. This is for next Saturday night. We have a flow here coming down out of Canada into the northeast, and you sort of have let's call it a splitish flow, where it's a weak split, but you do have a little bit of some southern energy there, and a nice big upper high that's building up in the northwest and pushing up into northwest Canada. It's a nice looking upper air pattern for the wintertime, if you're a winter weather lover. But looks like more troughing, trying to drop into the east over time. The one thing I did notice, Joe, is the fact that we seem to be in a pattern here where that northern jet is prominent. So that would argue that two things. It would keep us pretty much from getting into any kind of long-term gloom and doom blocking pattern. And on the other, and at the same time, with the troughing like this, it would argue that we'll have a regular passage of weather fronts every couple of days or so that it really can't get hot, and that looks to hold on for the next couple of weeks.
Well, it would be nice to have a pattern where we don't go through any extremes. No extreme chill, no extreme heat. That would be very, very nice indeed. But are we going to talk about the tropics, or are we going to
Well, we could do
speculate
that.
on that, or
We could do that. Yeah, just a moment. We can start speculating if you'd like to speculate. Speculate.
well, I'm just saying that. We were talking on Thursday about how in recent years, over the past decade, there seemed to be a sudden jump in activity in May. We of course recognize that the tropical storm or hurricane season begins on June 1st officially, but some have been pushing for it to start in mid-May, like around the 15th of May, because over the last decade, we've had a lot of tropical systems develop. Not in June, they haven't waited until June. They've been happening in May. So each year, I always look at the maps and in the tropics and speculate as to whether or not this is going to be one of those years where we kick off and get our first named storm before the 1st of June.
I would say this. I would say, given the upper air pattern that's indicated where you've got the westerlies pretty far to the south, I would probably lean against something forming in the Atlantic Basin this year in the month of May. I would also, with the warming water temperatures in the El Nino, might be a precursor to maybe something developing later in the month on the Eastern Pacific side.
Well, no matter how the season begins, and it may begin in a lackluster fashion with not much, in terms of any kind of significant activity. And we've seen over the last couple of years, it seems like, oh my goodness, there's nothing. Was it last year or the year before where we had hardly anything? right on through the month of August. And all of a sudden, boom, the explosion and the sudden occurrence of tropical systems. It seemed, development of tropical systems almost every other day. So it's very early, too soon, really, I think, to get excited or upset, if you will, about how the tropical season is going to be starting off or developing, because it always seems when we get to and at least in recently of September and October, and even sometimes into November, that we see more than our fair share of activity.
Yeah, I just I pulled up. There's a PDF here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the link on the chat board for those of you who want to take a look at it. But there is the Hurricane Center is making some changes this year with regards to what they put out. First off, the peak storm surge forecast graphic, which I didn't realize this, but apparently it was being provided experimentally since 2020, will now become operational. I think that has to do with budgets in the federal government. They might have had the money to do it in the experimental budget, but not in the regular budget. So they make that distinction. To the average person, I had no idea it was experimental. Storm surge, so that's the storm surge graphic, and that's what it looks like. So, and then the other thing that they also are issuing the potential. Let's see. Okay, so the potential storm surge flooding map issued by the National Hurricane Center that is currently produced for the U.S. Gulf and East Coast will be expanded to include Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands now. That'll be useful. The potential storm surge map shows geographical areas where inundation from storm surge could occur and how high above groundwater, how high above the ground the water could reach in those areas. And that's what that looks like. And the other thing is, we mentioned this well over a month ago when they announced this, but the tropical weather outlooks now will expand from 5 days to 7 days. So there'll be a 2-day and a 7-day formation probability being provided. And you know what? It kind of makes sense to me, given the fact that a week is not really too much to ask in terms of putting out a general outlook, and at the same time, it gives people an extra couple of days if there is something. And the other thing I would say is, too, in terms of the forecasting, and even the forecasting when it comes to these systems developing, has really gotten a whole lot better over the last 5 or 10 years. I mean,
no question.
Where they see something and they've got the models that do a decent job in the short range, where it's not a stretch to say that something might develop in the day 6 or 7 time frame.
Yeah, if I have anything negative to say, it's just that we've gotten so hyper that, and a few people have mentioned this to me, that, if you see even the slightest little chance of any kind of development, or if a storm develops out of a mass of clouds, let's say off the Florida coast, and suddenly is deemed a tropical system, and then the alarms go off or everything, and then everything just stops and comes to a standstill because we're on a tropical storm warning now, and people have said, oh, come on, too much. It's just too much information coming, being thrown at us at once. But again, that's part of the development of technology, Joe.
Yeah, well, that's the world we live in, so just have to sort of, grin and bear it. And if you don't want to look at it, don't look at it. And that's right. Some people want the information early. Actually, to also be fair, local folks that are responsible for storm preparedness, if they have an extra couple of days, heads up, they won't have much of an excuse to say that, oh, well, we didn't know. Nobody told us. I always like that one. No, when you get these weather events, surprise events. I'm trying to remember which one that it wasn't even. I don't know if it was a tropical system. but occasionally we'll get these storms, and somebody who apparently lives in a hole in the ground will come out and say, well, we had no idea this was coming. Oh, I'm sorry, now I remember. Yeah, it's those lovely politicians when it comes to um, big weather events, big snowstorms, and that kind of thing. Well, they like to scoop the weather people and throw them under the nearest 18-wheeler.
Nice analogy, Joe.
Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah. I would agree. Yes, you're right to a goodly amount.
Okay. So here's our first disturbance for tonight. You see that area. Actually, the GFS is not really showing. Those thunderstorms are much further south than what they're showing here. And they're not picking up on what's going on in across Kentucky into southern West Virginia and Virginia. So we'll have to watch to see where the errors are on the radars later. But we do have a little bit of shower activity that comes through tonight. Model wants to say there's a little bit more well to the north and a little bit more well to the south. I can see the southern part. I'll see about the northern part. Enough of a high builds in tomorrow. I think tomorrow's going to be a pretty decent day. You've got some showers and storms tonight in the areas where you have the enhanced risk in Iowa, northwestern Illinois, back into parts of Nebraska. And then tomorrow, again, not too much happening, although we do see some storms forming on in tomorrow's risk areas that we indicated earlier. We'll get into some showers with this low on a cold front on Tuesday. That goes by, and then a nice high builds in for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Meanwhile, there is a little storm there, a little energy coming into the west on Monday. And that creates a low in Colorado with some showers and storms, particularly in the plains later Wednesday. And then that low goes northward up into the Dakotas. So as long as those things are not going east, but they're going north, we remain pretty decent for the end of the week. Little weak front goes by on Friday. Maybe a shower with that late in the day. And then next weekend, Saturday looks good. After that, there's some stuff coming in from the west. Maybe it holds off for the end of the day on Mother's Day, if that's even real. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays.
We'll see how it plays, indeed.
And by the way, you could also see how the northern. When I was talking about the northern jet, you got these fronts that are coming through on a fairly regular basis, and highs that come down out of Canada and move into the eastern part of the United States. So there's nothing here that suggests that we're getting into any kind of long duration gloom and doom pattern in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, well, more than several years ago, we had a summer where we didn't have any heat and any humidity, or hardly any heat and humidity.
2009?
And I made a reference. That might have been 2009. I made a reference to it as being the Garden of Eden summer. But partially the reason why that it was what we're seeing right now, a very progressive pattern of weather fronts coming down out of Canada, sweeping on through and keeping the heat and the humidity to a minimum. And I would love to see this pattern. Of course, it's not going to happen, but I would love to see this type of pattern continue through June, July, and August. But, while we have it, we might as well enjoy it.
Well, I wish I could. Well, it gets humid here in North Georgia, but it's not terrible. And I've always maintained that the humidity you experience in the Northeast is far different than the humidity you experience in the Southeast. I think
Yes.
I think the humidity here is much more, how shall we say, livable. Even though it does come with regularity with temperatures in the upper 80s. Well, I'm in the mountains, so it'll be in the 90s downstate, but it'll be mid to upper 80s here. I'm wondering whether I'm going to see another 90-degree day because I've only seen it twice since I've been here.
Now, if you don't mind, I noticed that on the chat board, I think it was Chuck Cardillo who says, I want to thank the two of you because you don't hone in just specifically on weather, but you talk about other topics, and that's what makes your show interesting on a day-to-day basis. So I have three different things I want to bring up. Number one, you may recall a couple of weeks ago, we had a major geomagnetic storm. And for those who had clear sky, the aurora borealis, the northern lights, were visible all the way down as far south as California and Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and would have been visible here if it only had been clear. But of course, just as the storm began, we clouded over, and we had a mainly cloudy night here in the immediate tri-state area, although I did get reports, Joe, north of here, up in parts of the upper Hudson Valley and portions of New England, that it was clear enough to see the northern lights. But generally speaking, for the immediate New York City area, it was a wipeout. You didn't have much. And you say after something like that, well, wait till next time. Well, guess what? Next time is about to happen. Just got a report here that another potential moderate to major geomagnetic storm is going to hit later today, sometime around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, it's daylight, but as soon as it gets dark, go outside and take a look to see that, oh, wait a minute. The satellite picture that Joe showed a little earlier shows an advance of rather significant cloud cover, which will arrive right about that same time that the geomagnetic storm is going to begin. So once again, I must tell you all, and I know, Dennis Cassia, you're watching, you refer to this as Spode's Law. In other words, whenever something good is about to happen, something always comes along to trip you up. And it looks like that's going to be the case, that we're not going to get a chance to see tonight's potential spectacular display of the northern lights because, again, the weather. Maybe, Joe, every time that there's a potential display of northern lights, we should automatically just say it's going to get cloudy, because that seems to be the case most 9 out of 10 times, it seems, at least in recent years. So that's number one. Number two, this morning on CBS Sunday Morning, they always have at about 9:45 a.m. in the show, they list the people who have passed away during the past week. And one of the names that jumped out at me was Newton E. Minow, I should say. And Newton E. Minow, at one time, for a couple of years, was the head of the Federal Communications Commission. And I was mentioning, Mr. Renata, that he gave a speech saying something to the effect like, when television is good, nothing, not the theater, the magazines, or newspapers, nothing is better. But more often than not, television is bad. And when television is bad, nothing is worse. He said, I can assure you that when you have bad TV, that what you will be watching will be a vast wasteland. By the way, last night, the two of us were sitting in our TV room, and she's flicking the remote, and she says, there's nothing on tonight. And I said, of course there's nothing on. Saturday night, at one time, was the night to stay home. Saturday night, and the network that owned Saturday night was CBS. Look at CBS, 8 o'clock, All in the Family. 8:30, MASH. 9 o'clock,
Mary Tyler Moore. 9:30, Newhart. 10 o'clock, the Carol Burnett Show.
Carol Burnett Show. That's it. Your whole night of TV watching was set. Now, I mean, she was watching last night. We flicking the dial, and she was watching a show. I don't know what channel it was. Maybe it was Arts and Entertainment or whatever. A bunch of people digging somewhere in Malaysia or whatever for gold coins that had been sitting there for hundreds of years. And you know, the guy just sitting there doing a commentary for 5 minutes while he's flicking through these gold coins with his finger. And I'm saying, this is it? This is the best we can do on a Saturday night for television? But that's Newton Minow was right. But the thing that Renata did not know, and maybe some of you didn't know either, is that while some applauded the fact that he said it was a vast wasteland, TV that is, excessive violence, frivolity, all this criticism about that, people said that Minow came off as an elitist, snobbish type of person with such an attack. And here's something interesting. On Gilligan's Island, the name of the ship that shipwrecked them on the island, the SS Minnow, that was sarcastically named after Newton Minow to express displeasure with his assessment of the quality of television. So there you go. And Newton Minow sadly passed away yesterday of a heart attack. God help him. He lived until 97 years old. So right. There you go.
Well,
but that was number two. And then the last thing I want to point out, the third one is, and I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but today, May 7th, Did you know, Joe, that today is No Pants Day?
No, I did not know it was No Pants Day. I will
Now,
tell you that
now
if
before you're
I
now,
will tell you that I do have pants on. I don't have socks on.
okay,
So
but before your mind starts moving in a different direction as to that statement that it is No Pants Day, No Pants Day is a day when we're all urged to donate unwanted clothes or to give to a charity that helps people who need clothes. I myself did not know this, but uh, sometimes you
well, you're such a
have.
slave to fashion.
But in Dennis the Menace about a year ago, this is not this year, but last year, in honor of No Pants Day, in Dennis the Menace there was a picture of Dennis and his best friend Joey, and below the shirt there was a big sign saying No Pants Day, giving the impression that uh, Dennis and Joey were not wearing pants. Maybe they weren't wearing anything, but it was covered up by the sign "No Pants Day." And Dennis in that comic was saying, "I hope Mr. Wilson knows about this." Anyway, No Pants Day today, May the
Well,
7th.
well, just going back to the TV thing. Um, yeah, Saturdays are pretty much a vast wasteland, and actually a good portion of Sunday television is vast wasteland. Uh, I usually what I do on Saturdays is I watch BBC America because they have nonstop, uh, pretty much nonstop David Attenborough and Planet Earth, and I've seen every single one of them probably half a dozen times. But I have that running in the background because it's very relaxing to have um, nature going on, and I enjoy watching the uh, when they go to odd places like Antarctica and look at orcas plotting as a team to take out a few seals so that they can eat, that kind of thing. So that's what I watch. Uh, then the other variable is that if the schedule is good, I'll watch Turner Classic Movies, which I watch almost all the time. In fact, uh, one of my favorite movies, if not my top in my list of top five, is on at 8 o'clock tonight, which is All About Eve. I think All About Eve is one of the best movies ever made, especially if you're into movies that are well acted and have a terrific and are brilliantly written. So if you've never seen it, it might not necessarily be considered a guy's movie, okay? But if you are appreciative of great writing and terrific acting, uh, that is a must see. So you can mark that down on on your little reminder there for 8 o'clock tonight on Turner Classic. But yeah, it's there's nothing on. I mean,
Nothing.
there's really nothing on.
It makes me wonder, though, why MeTV, who has all of those
Or Pluto.
programs I mentioned, excuse
Or
me,
Pluto.
or Pluto, why don't on Saturday nights? Why doesn't MeTV show? Now, MeTV tonight will show 2 hours worth of All in the Family from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. But why don't they on Saturday night? Why can't they put on All in the Family at
Well,
eight
look,
o'clock and at 8:30?
you just came with a very good marketing idea. So why don't you call MeTV and say, hey, why don't you set up? You know how May is Mason month, right?
Well, this year they're doing a tribute to MASH, believe it or not. They're showing an extra hour of MASH, and each week they're highlighting a specific character in the month of May of MASH. Last week was Hawkeye week. This week I think is going to be Major Houlihan week. Next week it's going to be Radar week. I don't understand the whole. You're right though. They one year they did Perry Mason
Right.
month, and they showed all the great Perry Masons, the best Perry Masons. So. But I don't understand why they don't. They've got all those shows in syndication, and why don't they just line them up like they used to on Saturday night and see whether or not they get any kind of? Because they can't do that
Why?
because on Saturday night on MeTV it's science fiction night,
Oh,
starting with Svengoolie,
okay. So
and then
so
Star Trek and everything.
when that runs its course, which one day it will, they'll say, okay, we need to come up with something new for Saturday night. Somebody will sit there and say, well, Joe Rayo had this wonderful idea that we should make sense Saturday nights the CBS lineup from the 1970s as to pay homage to the traditional CBS network. And then they could work a whole campaign around that and sell all the sponsorships around that. Although, do they have Newhart? Do they have the Carol Burnett show?
They definitely have Carol Burnett because they run Carol Burnett on MeTV at 11 o'clock each weeknight. They have All in the Family. They certainly have MASH. I'm not sure. I think they have Newhart, although they never show it. And I also think they have the rights to Mary Tyler Moore. But that's a show. Why isn't Mary Tyler Moore, all these syndicated shows, why doesn't Mary Tyler Moore appear on a regular basis at night on, MeTV or TV Land or whatever? You never see this. Antenna TV, Anthony Spiraccio asked that. Yeah, you see some of the shows
you don't know who has the rights to these things.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's also a big issue because depending on who owns the library, I don't know who owns the CBS library. The deals that they have that they set up with these Antenna TV, MeTV, Pluto, and all the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, that's a logistical issue. I just bringing up Bob Newhart, by the way. His wife, I was reading the other day that his wife of, I don't know how many years, 60 plus,
60 plus
had
years,
passed away, and that she was the one that came up with the idea of having in the, not in the Bob Newhart show, but in the second Newhart show, which was also a great show, where on the last episode, that whole thing where he wakes up in bed as the old Newhart with Suzanne Pleshette.
Right, right.
So, and I was reading about the fact that she came up with that idea, and when they shot the show, no one had any clue that was going to be the ending. They had shot all these different endings, and
right.
I guess including the Suzanne Pleshette ending, and that the cast kind of not the cast, the crew, and and whoever else thought that was just they did it as a gag. That was just like a big gag, and that turned out to be how they came up with that particular ending for the second Bob Newhart show. And if you haven't seen the second if you never watched the second Bob Newhart show, I'm not going to get into what it was about.
Svengoolie. Why did I say Svengoolie? Because we have a couple of people here, Felix 33 and Christopher Alley, both say Svengoolie rules on Saturday night on TV Land. But getting back to the Newhart ending that you mentioned, according to Suzanne Pleshette, I mean, they had to sneak in because they did that in front of a live audience.
Yes.
So they had to sneak into the set so that they didn't see her or Bob. But she said as soon as the house lights came up and the audience saw the bedroom, which was so much a part of the first Newhart show when he played a psychologist, and as soon as they saw that, they immediately reacted to that because they knew what was coming because they saw it was the same bedroom that Bob and Emily, that was her name on the first show, was it. So she said they knew. We didn't even have to do anything. As soon as they saw the set with the bedroom, and they knew what was going to happen. And it was a very, very funny way to end the. They even said, I remember Bob Newhart said that they were even thinking about having President Reagan make an appearance, a cameo appearance on the show. For the end. So, but that was you just don't have great shows like that anymore on television. And yeah, it's a shame. And that's why I say, why not? Why not bring these shows back, at least in syndication, all on one night? So at least we'll have something to watch on Saturday night instead of watching people going through the sand in Ethiopia looking for gold coins. I mean, that's anyway.
Yeah.
Have we killed an hour yet?
Just about. We got 5 minutes. I will tell you this,
All right.
because I was with my mother last week, so we were watching Pluto TV. So we were sort of switching back and forth between watching Perry Mason and also watching I Love Lucy. And I kind of watched. Now I kind of watched uh, I Love Lucy with a different eye this time around. I sort of was looking for certain moments and watched. I paid very very close attention to the actors, uh, with particularly Vivian Vance and William Frawley. Uh, I came away with just how brilliant they were. I mean, they really. This was a case that I just think, when I always like to read the backstories around old movies and who was being considered for certain parts and who wound up getting those parts. And, I oftentimes try to think that, okay, if they had gone with the original actors, would the movie have worked? I mean, when a movie is really when a movie is really brilliantly done, especially among the classic movies, you can't see anybody else in those parts other than the people that have
Right.
played it. So,
Right.
and I think this applies to, I think it applies to the Honeymooners. I think it applies to, it definitely applies to I Love Lucy and a bunch of other shows. But I watched those two actors go at it. And one of the scenes that really struck me was the, there were two episodes with Hans Conried in it. One where he plays the moving man when Lucy wins, thinks she won the furniture from the home show,
Right.
and she sells him he's the second hand man. And then a couple of episodes later, because that was actually the last episode. No, that was the second to last episode before they had the episode where she tells Ricky that she's going to have a baby. Well, the first episode after that is Hans Conried is this really strict, old-fashioned school teacher that's going to
Right.
teach him how to speak everybody how to speak proper English. William
Right.
Frawley comes into the room dressed up as Buster Brown with the big lollipop socket and singing "School Day, School Way," and I watched him. He just literally stole that scene. I mean, it was just he was so good. He was just so
Wait a minute, will you?
He was just so good. And Vivian Vance also, just to give her credit too. She was brilliant.
This is a Ricky Ricardo production. I got wind of it.
And considering the fact that Vivian Vance and William Frawley did not get along by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you never could. You never saw it in their performances. I mean, they were just wonderful.
And let me here's something you may not have thought of. Back in the 1950s, you could not show a man and a woman in the same bed. You could not. That even on a wholesome show like the Dick Van Dyke Show. Mary Tyler Moore had one bed, Dick Van Dyke had the other bed. And in fact, later in the 1960s, Don Grady, who played Robbie on My Three Sons, just had a volcanic eruption. I read this in some book about the show, about the fact that he was told that he could not get into the same bed with Tina Cole, who played his wife, Katie. He said, my God, it's the late 20th century. It's the late 1960s. What do you think people are doing, out there? But getting back to the 1950s, the first married couple on television that appeared in the same bed and nobody ever said anything about it was Fred and Ethel. In the episode where I think when they're going to California,
she ties him to the bed.
He ties him to the bed and then gets into the bed. Right. And Fred and Ricky and Lucy are watching this, and they're both in the same bed. And they said, you do that every night? He says, yeah, but it took years of practice.
Yeah, because the mattress was so soft it sunk like a canoe.
Exactly. But they were in the same bed, and nobody ever registered a complaint. I'm sure nobody said it because it's Fred and Ethel.
Yeah.
And, that's it. But if you think about it, they were the first couple ever to appear on television in the same bed, and nobody Nobody
Well,
said a
in the
peep.
first season of I Love Lucy, if you look, they were they had twin beds, but they were twin beds that they were next to each other. You could see the
Right.
line of the sheet running down the middle. So, but
Exactly.
they were two twins beds, and then later on, they in later scenes and later on in the show, they went back, especially after they had the baby, they go to the separate beds. But
Right.
I've read so many, Joe. I've read so many things over the years about movies, particularly movies in the 30s when the Hays Code came into play, and how they had to change. Directors and producers were forced to change certain endings of certain movies that were different from what the writers of the the books that they were based on, where because you could not, for example, Hitchcock threw a fit because in Suspicion, when Cary Grant is driving with Joan Fontaine on the mountain road, and it looks like, and you think as the audience member, having seen the movie at that point, that he's going to push her out. Okay, in the original book that Suspicion was based on, that's exactly what happens. But they had to change it, and they had to come up with this whole convoluted story so that, because the idea was that the bad guy has to be punished at the end of the movie. So they couldn't show the bad person, getting away with it. The Bad
Right.
Seed, the original, the movie based on the play, they had to change the ending where Rhoda is killed. But in the book, if you've read the book The Bad Seed, and in the play, she survives, and
Right.
her mother dies, and they had to do this all because of the stupid Hays Code. So what movie was it? I watched a movie where it was a Betty Davis movie. Oh, Deception. Okay, they had to change the movie around because in the original book that it was based on, the woman, the boyfriend. This is bizarre, Joe. So the boyfriend in the movie Deception kills the other lover. Okay, the other lover was a man that the Betty Davis character had an affair with. But the thing was that the guy. It was a World War. The guy disappeared in World War II in Europe, and they couldn't find him, and they thought he was dead. And suddenly he came back to life. So it was like 5 years had passed. She had moved on with her life. She was having an affair with this other guy. Anyway, they had to change the ending where the Betty Davis character kills the guy because of the Hays Code. They could not. Betty Davis could not. The character should not have been rewarded for having an illicit affair, an illicit married affair with another man. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. But that's what they used to do, and it, it's anyway. That's the way the world was with all the censoring and everything else. So,
And incidentally, just getting back to weather, because we've talked about everything else except weather. It was on this day that a first happened for me back in 2020, 3 years ago. And that is, I'm looking on my Facebook memories here, that I actually, in a nearly 42-year career as a professional meteorologist, I drew a snow map up for the month of May. This was the day back in 2020 where we had a trace of snow in New York, in Central Park. And I actually had on this snow map, I'm looking again on my Facebook memory page, I had like 1 to 2 inches of snow for places in Ulster County and Dutchess County, and up in northern sections of Sullivan County and northwestern Ulster County, 2 to 4 inches. That was on this day 3 years ago. And it's hard to believe. And I point out that chiefly at elevations above 500 feet. But incredible that today it's already 71 degrees here at the house. Beautiful afternoon coming up. But on this day 3 years ago, we were actually talking about snow.
Well, let me just take a look. Because I save all of my snow maps. But apparently I did not do. No, I don't have any. Okay, I just wanted to see if I had a snow map for that particular day, and I did not. I save all the snow maps that I've drawn, because I just that I've ever drawn, because I've just dated them. So, on the idea that maybe one day somebody might ask about it, or and you just did. So I went to see if I did, and I didn't do one. So. Anyhow, okay, so we have now pushed it to just about an hour and 6 minutes. I think we could call it a day and get everybody out there before the sun disappears. So,
Yes.
the Joe and Joe Weather Show, as is the case today and every day, is brought to you by our newest affiliate, Tempest by Weatherflow. The link is on the top of the chat board and on the descriptor to this video. This is the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and it's easy to install. I have one. I have two of them, actually, and join the fastest growing observing network on the planet. They have that and other weather gizmos and gadgets and other weather merchandise. So if that is something that you might be interested in, use the referral links that are up, again, pinned to the top of the chat or in the descriptor, and use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, and you get 10% off on your purchase. And brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. The website is omnitruevalue.com.
And we want to thank again our friends who hit the tip jar today, and that's Anthony Spiraccio, Trish Spiraccio, and Chuck Cardillo. We thank you ever so much.
Have a great Sunday, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 7:35. Night.
Good night.